Today, we're going to talk about a really fascinating and honestly a pretty tragic figure, William McIntosh. He was a prominent Creek chief, but his life was just completely torn between two worlds. His death? It's right at the heart of the story of the Creek Nation's removal from Georgia. It's a story about incredible pressure and one single choice that, well, it changed absolutely everything.
So that brings us to the big question, right? How on earth does a powerful chief get executed? By his own people? I mean, that's a huge deal. To really get it, we've got to rewind and see how it all fell apart. Okay, I want you to picture this. It's April 30th, 1825. The sun's not even up yet, and Chief William McIntosh's house is completely surrounded. We're talking 200 warriors. But here's the thing. These aren't enemies from some other tribe. They're not American soldiers. They're Creeks, his own people. And they're not there to talk. They're there to carry out a sentence.
To make sense of a scene like that, we have to understand the world McIntosh was living in. It was a world where two very different cultures were colliding with just incredible force.
To really get what McIntosh was up against, you have to understand just how big of a deal the Creek Nation was in Georgia. I mean, they weren't some small, forgotten tribe. No, they were the most populous, they held the most land, and they were a huge trading partner. But, and this is a big but, they sided with the English back in the Revolution, and that created some serious, long-lasting bad blood with their Georgian neighbors.
And William McIntosh? He was the literal embodiment of this culture clash. His mom was Creek, his dad was Scottish, so he had deep roots in both worlds. Get this, he was even first cousins with Georgia's governor at the time, George Troup. That gave him some pretty unique political connections and a whole lot of influence on both sides of the fence.
And this wasn't just about his family tree. It was about two completely different visions for the future. You see, most Creek people valued things like communal land for everyone, and their traditional culture. McIntosh, on the other hand, he fully embraced the American model. He owned 2 plantations, he pushed for private property, and he was a slaveholder, all of which put him directly at odds with the way most of his people lived and what they believed.
This friction, this tension between tradition and assimilation, it wasn't just some friendly debate. It eventually exploded into a brutal civil war that would tear the Creek Nation apart from the inside out.
The conflict became known as the Red Stick War. And at its core, it was a fight over one thing: how to deal with the constant, growing pressure from white settlers who wanted their land. It was a fight that pitted Creek against Creek.
So the nation basically split right down the middle. On one side, you had the Red Sticks. They wanted to fight back, to resist the settlers and go back to their traditional ways. And on the other side, you had the White Sticks. They wanted peace, and they believed the best way forward was to align with the United States.
And this right here, this is a huge moment in McIntosh's story. He didn't just pick a side. He chose to side with the United States against a huge portion of his own Creek people. He actually led the White Stick warriors into battle against the Red Sticks. You can bet that was an act that would never, ever be forgotten.
The war reached its bloody conclusion at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend. There, American forces, led by a guy you might have heard of, Andrew Jackson, fought alongside McIntosh and the White Sticks. They crushed the Red Sticks. The Civil War was over, but the consequences for the entire Creek Nation were absolutely catastrophic.
Get ready for this number. 22 million. That's not a typo. 22 million acres of land that the Creek Nation was forced to sign away after the war. I mean, can you even wrap your head around that? Just a staggering, devastating loss. And it was a direct result of that defeat.
So that brings us to the final act in this tragedy. Even after losing so much, the Creeks still had land in Georgia. But the pressure to get them out, to remove them completely, was about to hit a boiling point, and it would lead to what many saw as the ultimate betrayal.
So, by 1825, the state of Georgia and the U.S. government were just relentless. They wanted what was left of the Creek land, and they were not going to take no for an answer. This set the stage for one last, incredibly controversial treaty.
The price on the table for all remaining Creek land in Georgia was $200,000. But, this wasn't just some straightforward real estate deal. To many of the Creek people, this smelled like one thing: a bribe.
So here's the play-by-play. McIntosh gets together with just a handful of other chiefs, and they meet with some U.S. agents, and boom, they sign what's called the Second Treaty of Indian Springs. But here's the massive problem, the deal breaker. They had zero, and I mean zero, authority from the Creek National Council to do this. It was a completely rogue, illegal deal. And to pour salt on the wound,
McIntosh got a little extra cash on the side for his own personal land.
Well, the reaction was swift, and it was severe. The Creek National Council saw this treaty for what it was: treason. They saw the payment as a bribe. For selling off their ancestral lands without any right to do so, they condemned McIntosh and under Creek law sentenced him to death.
The execution of McIntosh was this dramatic, violent climax to the whole story. But his death, it didn't change the devastating outcome of his actions. His legacy is just one of tragedy, both for himself and, especially, for his people.
You can see the dominoes falling here, right? It's a clear line. The defeat in the Red Stick War leads to that massive loss of land. Then comes the illegal treaty signed by McIntosh, which leads directly to his execution. But the most tragic domino to fall was the last one. The U.S. government took that very same illegal treaty and used it as the quote-unquote legal justification to forcibly remove every last Creek person from Georgia.
So in the end, the Creek Nation's act of justice against McIntosh didn't save their land. The treaty, as controversial and illegal as it was enforced. The path that McIntosh paved, whether he meant to or not, led directly to his people losing their home.
And so that leaves us with this really tough question, one that historians still argue about. Was William McIntosh just a traitor, plain and simple, selling out his people for money and power? Or was he a pragmatist, a guy caught between two worlds who looked at the unstoppable force of American expansion and thought, this is it, ceding the land is the only way for any of us to survive? There's just no easy answer, and his story, man, it's just such a powerful and tragic chapter in American history.